Hey, good morning, everybody. 10 Tampa Bay Meteorologist Grant Gilmore here. 10:11 now, if you're watching this recorded later. 10:11 on Friday morning, that is. Glad you're here. Glad you're here to talk about the tropics. There's a lot to talk about. Some updates from the last Facebook Live that we did about an hour and a half ago. But I did want to pass along some of the latest information that we've gotten from the Hurricane Center. There's a plane flying around in it right now, so we've gotten some new information, stuff that I want to pass along. But I think a big update's coming at 11. Well, I know it's coming at 11. Whether or not you want to call it a big update, that's probably debatable. But we will have our next update from the Hurricane Center coming in at 11 o'clock. So that'll give us a new track and give us the latest specs on how strong the storm is, so on and so forth. So been stalling a little bit, making sure that I've got my comments up here so I can see you guys checking in. Good morning to all of you that are here. Hopefully you're having a good Friday so far. Let's change this over so you don't have to see me anymore and you can see what's going on with what is now Tropical Storm Laura. So this is what was previously Tropical Depression 13. And now with those hurricane hunters, they have found that it has in fact strengthened to a tropical storm with wind speeds at 45 miles per hour. So let me show you those hurricane hunters and what they found and kind of the reason that we now believe that it's a tropical storm. Well, they've been really flying around. It hasn't been that normal, what we call alpha pattern, because the storm is not a normal storm at this point. I mean, if you look at this here, the flight pattern has been all over the place. They came in, they took off from St. Croix, they flew in, they turned right, and then they kind of circled up here. They flew around, and then they kind of flew somewhat of an alpha pattern. And then here they are now. So there's been some, they call it hunting. I mean, they really are hunting right now. But what's interesting is one of the initial reports that they found was that wind speed report of 72 miles per hour. And I actually talked to the meteorologist that's ground support for this current mission. And what they believed was that actually that report was in the midst of really heavy rainfall. So it obscured and probably made the report and the observation just not trustworthy. But since then, they have still found other reports and other observations that would support the idea that wind speeds have increased to tropical storm strength. There's one right there. They found wind speeds at 47 miles per hour. There was another observation with wind speeds. Let's see if I can get that to show up here. Is that going to show up? No, it's not. But there was that one report of wind speeds at 47 miles per hour. There's been a few other reports with wind speeds in excess of that tropical storm force. So there we have it. The tropical storm Laura is now on the map, and it's roughly about 250 miles east of the Leeward Islands. Another interesting note that you'll see, just going through the loop there's that jog to the south. That was what the hurricane hunters found, was that the center of the storm was a little bit farther south than they had originally estimated it to be. So what that means is we'll probably have a shift to the south in the forecast track that we'll see at 11 o'clock. The forecast, though, is for it to strengthen to a hurricane by the time we get into early next week, and that's because it's going to be moving over some warmer waters north of the Caribbean into the Florida Straits, probably into the Keys area by the time we get into, looks like it's going to be Monday at this point. But here's the thing. So this is the latest track. Again, see that how it turns to the north? That turn to the north is because of that recent observation of the southerly shift. So that will all iron itself out once we get the latest track. But I do think it's important to show that as we go through Monday into Tuesday, whether that track is here, which obviously we don't want, or if the track is way out over the Gulf of Mexico, we're still going to have a likely, I'll say likely, but likely a strengthening system, be it a tropical storm or worst case scenario, a hurricane off the coast of Florida as it's moving by. So that's the important thing to note, and that's where we're going to get into the potential impacts that we could see here in Tampa Bay. The forecast models, though, have been shifting to the south recently, so we've seen this slight shift in the models to go more south of Florida, potentially having that interaction with Hispaniola and Cuba. But I think until we get the storm in the vicinity of Puerto Rico, we won't have a good idea of exactly what track it will take. Will it be more of that northerly track, which the models have said over the last couple of days, or will the recent trend be that more of a southerly track? In which case, if it takes that southerly track, it would be likely weakened by the mountainous terrain over Hispaniola and Cuba. So that's kind of where we sit right now. The current forecast would have those tropical storm force winds, or at least the potential for tropical storm force winds, arriving as early as Monday evening. Now, that's just those tropical storm force winds. I think we could still see some fringe showers and some gusty conditions Sunday night into Monday morning. But with the latest forecast coming in, that likelihood is looking even lower and lower for tropical storm force winds here in Tampa Bay. That said, the worst of the conditions could still be Monday night into Tuesday. So we're still looking at that time period, roughly Monday night into Tuesday, for the worst of the conditions that we would see. The degree and the details of those conditions are still a little bit unclear at this point. Again, I think give it another 24 hours or so, and we should have a better idea of exactly what those impacts are going to be from what's now actually Tropical Storm Laura. I need to update this graphic. This graphic hasn't been updated since just a little bit ago when we got that update from the Hurricane Center. So that's just the quick update, guys, that I had just since it became a tropical storm. And obviously, let's see here. Tropical storm was forecast. In fact, it was forecast to become a tropical storm yesterday. So we kind of bought some time over the last 24 hours or so for it to be a little bit slower in its organization. But let me get to some of your comments and questions, and if anybody has anything that they'd like to say or just chat about, scrolling through your comments here, not a lot of questions from what I can see. Let's see. Marla saying full moon, high tide, east side of the storm. Well, the farther away the storm is going to go, the less of an impact we would have from the potential for surge. But obviously, when you get a full moon, you're going to have just higher tides normally. Those are normal predicted tidal ranges. So we'll have to, obviously, we'll be watching that potential, which would likely not be until Tuesday as the storm moves to the north and west and those winds shift to the southwest. So that would be kind of a Tuesday threat if we have that hazard at all. Let's see, what else we have here? Lisa says, oh, it's okay, not as bad as you think. I guess I'm jumping on the conversation a little bit later. There. Let's see. Nancy's saying, don't come into the Gulf. Isn't that true? We don't want storms coming to the Gulf. Let me show you this, though, because there is another storm, which you've probably heard about, is Tropical Depression 14. And Tropical Depression 14 is also going into the Gulf of Mexico, or at least the forecast is for it to go into the Gulf of Mexico. Right now, it is just to the northeast of the coast of Honduras, and it's tracking to the northwest. It will likely become Tropical Storm Marco later today as it tracks toward the Yucatan, and then eventually it will move into the Gulf of Mexico. And have a look at this forecast here. So this has the forecast cone for both of our systems here. You've got Tropical Storm Laura, and then what will probably become Tropical Storm Marco later today. And we could potentially have 2 Category 1 hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico at the same time. That would be Laura on the east side of the Gulf and Marco on the left side, the west side of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, here's what's interesting. As these forecast tracks come into a little bit more of an alignment, there is the possibility, and this is a little far-reaching into kind of the textbooks of meteorology, but still interesting nonetheless, I think. If you get a system that is, or I'll say 2 tropical systems that are within 1,000 miles of each other, really it's like around 800 or 900 miles. But if you get them close enough, there's this effect called Fujiwara Effect. And the spinning of both of those systems will create sort of a natural pull for both of those systems to maybe pull towards each other. Now, in extreme cases, they would spin around each other and almost do like a do-si-do. That's not going to happen with this scenario. But I think there could be some influence where both of these storms maybe get pulled toward each other a little bit, just on the fringe of that Fujiwara effect starting to take shape. Just measuring out the distance between both of those storms at the forecasted points, they're going to be roughly 500 miles apart. So that's close enough to where you could see an influence of both of those storms on each other. It wouldn't push them away. It would potentially pull them closer to each other, which would obviously mean more of a concern for an impact there in the central Gulf Coast there in the Louisiana, Mississippi area. So that's long term. That's not towards until like next Tuesday or Wednesday, but obviously that's an interesting and a unique scenario where you're probably saying, when was the last time that happened? Glad you asked. The last time that we had two landfalling tropical systems in the Gulf of Mexico was in 1933. It doesn't happen very often. So it just kind of goes in line with that whole idea of 2020, man. 2020 has been a year. I mean, we're living in history right now, as far as I'm concerned. That's just not something that you want to see, or not something that you really rarely ever do see. So anyway, Tropical Storm Laura now on the map. I just wanted to bring you guys a quick update. There's no need to panic right now for Tampa Bay. We don't need to be putting up the shutters yet, but make sure you start having those conversations with your family, friends, neighbors about what would we do if this track shifts to the east. What's our plan? What's our plan beginning probably Monday morning, hopefully wrapping up by Monday afternoon, and what are we going to do if this track shifts back to the east? The trend is for it to track farther to the south and to the west, but we've got to have that plan. I've already had the conversations with my family and what we would do given different scenarios, and what we would do with our daughters, and how I would plan accordingly. So it's important to start having those conversations. It doesn't hurt to plan, and then you don't have to use that plan. You had it just in case. You got to plan for the worst and hope for the best, which in this case we're starting to see those potential impacts lessen here in Tampa Bay. So that's the update, guys. I don't want to keep you too long. I'm going to pop out of here, and we'll try to have more updates for you as we go through the rest of this event. But keep checking back. Like I said, 11 o'clock we'll have a new update from the Hurricane Center. That 11 o'clock advisory will give us a new forecast track along with the updated locations and wind speeds of Tropical Storm Laura. So be looking for that. Of course, the 10 Tampa Bay app, if you download it, we can send you those push notifications as soon as that information comes down, so you get it. You don't even have to think about it. It just shows up on your phone, as well as obviously right here on Facebook, where we'll have those updates for you as well as they come down. So, guys, have a good rest of your Friday morning, and try to enjoy your weekend. The forecast is going to be very similar to what we're seeing today, and that's a chance for some scattered showers and storms. Go figure, right? So anyway, guys, have a good rest of your Friday, and we'll be in touch.